So Jai is delivering on a promise that I made to myself when I was 16 years old. My parents got divorced when I was really young. I think I was around 3. And my dad very quickly remarried. When I was 7, they had a son, Ian, who's my brother, obviously. And his mom, my stepmother, was definitely an authoritative parent. In all truth, she was bordering on being an abusive parent. She was incredibly manipulative, and things that my little brother did that were cute on Tuesday would get him locked in the bathroom for an hour on Friday. She was incredibly punitive with him. He would get Tabasco in his mouth, soap in his mouth. He would have to sit at the dining room table if he didn't finish his dinner until the whole thing was done. And so I had this front row seat as a teenager to witnessing the ramifications of that model of parenting on a young and growing little boy. One day, when he was being punished for not finishing his dinner, he was sitting at the dining room table at my dad's house, and I'll never forget the picture. He was sitting at the head of the table, and his little body was just slumped over. He looked so sad and so defeated. He didn't want to gag down the mushy fist sticks, and yet he wasn't allowed to get up until he did. And I remember standing behind him and taking in this scene, and I just had this download moment. And I heard myself say, when you become a parent, you are going to know how to do it fairly. I really understood that this way that he was being parented was deeply unfair and so confusing to him. He didn't know how to behave. So flash forward, 20 years. I have my own 2 little evolving human beings with all of their feelings and emotions and needs and big, highs and lows. And it was really hard. And so at the time, it's embarrassing to admit this now as the CEO of a company that teaches peaceful parenting and parenting without punishments and consequences, but my go-to resource at the time was Super Nanny. What's really true is that it always made me feel better about my own parenting. And so I'd watch these stories, but what the Super Nanny taught was when a child broke the rules, right, the implied rules that were put on them, that's my language now, not what I would have said at the time, you would put them in timeout for as many minutes as they were old, and then they needed to say they were sorry for the transgression. And if they didn't say they were sorry, they needed to sit for another, 3 minutes if they were 3, or 5 minutes if they were 5. So one time, my son, I don't even remember what he had done to break the rules, but he got put in timeout, and he sat there, I kid you not, for over an hour. It was like 20 rounds of 4-minute timeouts. And then the rest of the day, he wouldn't look at me. He would not give me any attention. It was like he was holding a grudge. And you know what? He should have been. And I thought to myself, this isn't it. Like, this is not the way to live up to that promise that I made myself when my little brother was 8 years old. And so I started down a path of interviewing conscious parenting experts and really learning that there are more effective, more conscious, more loving, more effective, quite frankly, tools of parenting that have everything to do with emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, conscious communication, and really understanding the neurology of a child, what's happening in their little growing brains as they're growing, so that we can be their guide and their mentor and teach them to navigate their own emotions and their own communication in quite frankly, a very mature way. And so that is really my foundation of coming into this work. And I was blessed a decade ago to meet my then co-founder, Jolette Jai, who had a body of work that actually systematically and effectively taught these tools to parents. And so over the last 10 years, we've been training parenting coaches in the Jai methodology all over the world. The number of lives that this work has changed, it's humbling, quite frankly. It still brings me to my knees when I hear the stories of, a mom who stopped yelling, or a dad who thought there was no way that he could let go of timeouts or taking kids' toys away or punishing them, that all bedlam would break loose if that, control was released. And of course, That's not how it works. And I think the magic of this work is when we meet another human being, whether they're 2 or 92, in the space of understanding that they have real needs and real feelings, and that the intention is to create connection and collaboration within that space, behavior really goes away. One of the things that we teach is that behavior is an expression always of an unmet need. And so when needs are met, children don't need to act out. They don't need to retaliate. They don't hold a grudge. They don't need to bicker with their sister to gain attention or to scratch that itch. And so, as if by magic, the houses of the families that we support become super peaceful, dare I say fun, all the way into the teenage years. I have the blessing of having brought this work to my children when they were quite little, and now they're 14 and 16 years old. People will meet them and they'll say, "How'd you do that? You know, your kids like look me in the eye and they can have an amazing conversation." And I will sometimes say, well, you know, I used the modalities that we teach, which is learning to parent with conscious communication and not using punishments and consequences. And sometimes people will look at me a little cross-eyed because they think there's no way that that could work for their kids. They'll say to me, "Oh, well, you had good kids." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't see Miles when he used to bang his head against the floor for 40 minutes. Anyway, I share all this so that you can feel into whether we might be a place for you to consider learning to parent to meet the ideal that you have in your own mind, not out of a sense of perfection, but a sense of knowing that you have the tools to be the parent you want to be for your child. And perhaps if this really excites you, you might even consider joining us in our Parent Coach Certification Program. We're on a mission to change the world by changing the way that parents parent. And I would love for you to join us in that cause. I'm Kiva Schuler. Thanks so much for being here with me today. Bye for now.